live stream. We have apologies for absence, which is the first thing on the agenda, and we have apologies from the Vice Chair, Councillor Yates, from Councillor Hill and from Councillor Leung. Item 2, declaration of interest. Has anybody got anything that they wish to declare? Councillor Checkland.
Not sure I need to declare it, just that I'm chair of a club that's got one of these food hygiene ratings, so I don't think it'll influence things, but I have a less interest in it, I suppose.
No, you don't need to declare it.
Okay.
According to Lorraine. Right, item 3 are the minutes of the previous meeting. We still need to go through them despite the fact they've gone through full council.
Yeah.
So are you happy that we agree to the minutes on the 30th of January?
Yes.
Yeah.
Everybody, yep, thank you. And now we go on to item 4, which is the food safety delivery plan. And Lorraine, you're going to take us through this, are you?
Yes, I'll take you through just to introduce myself. So I'm Lorraine Chapman. I'm the Food and Health and Safety Team Manager. It's our team that's responsible for delivering all of the authorities.
Can you speak up a bit, please?
Our team, the Food and Health and Safety Team, is responsible for delivering all of the authorities' food safety services to just under 1,000 food businesses, give or take. And it's essential that the delivery of food safety enforcement is undertaken in an approved and consistent manner in compliance with government requirements. The service delivery plan for food safety enforcement really is a fundamental part of this process, just to ensure that national priorities and standards are addressed and delivered locally, taking account of all the local needs. The activities in the plan are a statutory requirement. The authority is obliged to meet the requirements of the Food Law Code of Practice, which does set out how we should carry out food safety interventions and enforcement. This includes carrying out effective and appropriate official controls, having sufficient numbers of suitably qualified and experienced members of staff. As part of its duties, the Food Standards Agency, the FSA, is responsible for monitoring and reporting on the performance of food safety authorities. So the FSA will monitor and audit us authorities through the statutory returns. So we were approached by the FSA after our April 24 submission due to a backlog of inspections that had occurred that was a result of a loss of 2 district posts, March 22 and August 22, until May 24, where 1 full-time post was reinstated, and we've also received additional resource for an apprentice environmental health officer. So commitment from the team, and importantly this extra resource, has allowed us to work towards clearing this backlog, and the FSA have supported our service delivery plan, and we're assured with our service level provision and prioritisation. We continue to work towards and maintain realignment with the Food Law Code of Practice, and realignment is set to be achieved by the end of this financial year as forecasted. Food Safety Service is experienced at delivering the requirements outlined in this plan, and this plan supersedes the existing approved Food Safety Delivery Plan dated 24/25. So the service plan is presented to the committee tonight to be recommended to the cabinet member that it's approved.
Thank you very much, Lorraine. This is, as I'm sure you'll agree, it's a very full, detailed up, but it's a very important report. And I asked a number of questions at the pre-meeting we had, so it's over to all of you now if there are things that you wish to raise on it before we go for the recommendation. Amy.
You read through it. There were a few questions that I thought of. One, does vaping come under the smoke-free compliance part of 2.3.2?
No, it doesn't.
No. Should it?
That would require a change in legislation.
Okay, thank you. The next one was, it mentions the risk profiles for category A to E, but I didn't find anywhere in the report that says what falls into which categories.
Right, okay, well that can vary. It'd probably be
I gathered A was the very high risk ones, but beyond I couldn't tell where a takeaway would sit.
For example, so when we inspect a food premises, set out in the Food Law Code of Practice is a risk rating scoring matrix. That matrix is made up essentially, the first few questions talk about the inherent nature of the business. what's the likelihood of risk from the level of food operations that they're undertaking? What is the consequence if something was to go wrong? Do they just serve local people? Is it a national company? So they get scored against things like that. So they can't really change that. That is the makeup of the food business. The latter part of that rating talks about compliance. So that's where they can influence their risk rating score. So somebody who is highly compliant, obviously the level of risk is much lower than somebody who's not complying, and that scores it higher. So you could get a takeaway that's quite high risk if they aren't compliant. But then also you could get one that's doing well, slightly lower risk. Now, category A is the highest, so they score the highest score. Category E is the lowest score. So category E are your lower risk.
So it's not dependent on the type of outlet, it's dependent on the risk assessment put in place when they first come to light, or when you do.
Certain degree, but yes, essentially you're right. Yes.
Okay. My next one was, it mentions in point 2.44, 44% increase compared to last year. Now, I've mentioned this in ONS percentages don't mean anything unless there's a number next to it. Is that 2 or 200?
If we have a look, then there should be some numbers in there in the action plan. So from page 20, is it 6.4.2?
6, right.
Talks about carrying out revisits. So last year, for example, bearing in mind the figures are only up because this is now a yearly plan. So the figures were taken up to the end of January. So it's not quite a full year. So up to the end of January, we had 36 revisits. Whereas the year before, it was much lower. But in terms of, so as a percentage, I suppose what you're saying is 44.
Just put the numbers next to it so that within the document it means something. I accept you're saying it's in 6 point something, but it's referred
Yes, it's
to.
in the action plan. It details what we achieved last year and then what we hope to achieve this year. I think the fundamental point to take from that is that essentially 94% of our businesses are scoring a 5. We are pretty good. Generally, out the 900 to 1,000 premises, we have about 14 that are scoring 2 or below. So we are talking about a small proportion, and it's those premises that score the 2 or below that are statutorily required to have a revisit. However, they are the ones that require the more resource from us and intervention to help them achieve compliance.
That leads me on to my last question. They don't have to show their food hygiene ratings within the premises. Do we have a page within our website, and I did try to find one, that lists what premises has which food hygiene rating, so that it would then encourage the public to choose the better places to eat, and therefore suggest to those who are scoring badly that they need to improve their game?
Totally agree. It's not a mandatory requirement. It is in Wales. Certainly food officers across the country are pushing for mandatory display. We are still hoping that that will be achieved. However, in the meantime, the FSA, we upload our figures every 2 weeks. And so the FSA have an online platform that it can be checked by anybody as to what a rating of a premise is. We can put that onto our front page on our council page if you'd like us to.
I just think that would be an advantage when someone's going out and they want to say, right, I'm
For sure.
linked to it. That's all of my points.
David.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, it's on numbers again. I think it's number 3, it's page 23, top of page 23. I was just surprised how many, well, the line is, in addition, we also get around 144 new businesses per annum to inspect. It's an awful lot of new businesses.
Yes, so the new unrated figures is made up of, that could be people starting totally afresh. That will also be where people, businesses have changed hands, or there's been some kind of ownership change as well. So they're all classed as new businesses. The significance of that figure is that they require an inspection, and they may not necessarily have been due, because that's just the way the Code of Practice is written, that any fundamental change requires a re-inspection. We Probably have seen slightly lower numbers this year. During the COVID years, we had a large increase in new businesses. That does seem to have settled back to almost pre-COVID times. So we average, it's about 10 to 15 a month.
Because of course, it covers mobile businesses and
Yes, that's everything. Yeah.
what, so yeah, it all adds up. Thank you.
Anybody else?
Yes, thank you. You said that the increase in resource of people will allow the backlog to go by the end of the financial year, so that's coming
Yes.
up soon.
Pretty much up to date as we stand today.
So going forward, do you anticipate keeping the same staffing levels so that you stay on top of it? Now, you know, clearly you've been doing what needs to be doing and catching up at the moment. So will that allow you to do any more, or is there any suggestion that the staffing will reduce once the additional capacity to catch up has happened?
My understanding that we aren't going to reduce, we will retain what we have. I think what I would say at the moment is there is sufficient resource to meet the requirements of the plan. However, there isn't too much flex. So say there was an unexpected circumstance or whatever, it would be likely to fall behind again. So it needs to be maintained. One would hope now that with the resources we have, we can start to do the other nice to haves as well, instead of focusing just primarily on the statutory enforcement side.
I have been speaking to James on a number of occasions about the numbers that we have, because it is important that we have the correct number, and it's good that you've got the apprentices now as well. So hopefully that will be, it's difficult to get them, but it's hopefully that'll be working for us. Yeah.
A couple of questions. The first one is, apparently there's an increase in air quality around the A38.
That's not this one. That's on the next item 5.
Sorry. Yeah. Oh, yeah. The senior food status officer seems to be meeting one-on-one with staff once a month, which seems quite a high frequency.
Well, that's part of monitoring performance, and it is a highly experienced team. So that's myself as the team leader. The one-to-ones, we use it as a way of just keeping on track of, especially with hybrid working as it is now, and officers are out on site a lot. Certainly in the food team, a lot of their time is spent out on district. So it's really useful as just to touch base more than anything else, just to make sure where they are with ratings, just discuss standardisation of scorings, those types of things. So it's actually a really useful tool, even for experienced officers.
Anybody else? You will agree that this is a really good report.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
It's not a depth. There are areas for improvement, and then we've got the action plan. So having said everything that you want to say, I agree that we go to the recommendations that the Regulatory and Licensing Committee considers it, which we've done, and we recommend to the Cabinet now that it is approved.
Great.
Thank you very much, Lorraine, and thank you for the report, because it must have taken you hours and hours to actually write it. Thank you. We're now on to item 5, which is the revocation of the air quality management plan, and that's Jack that's going to take us through that.
Okay, thank you,
It's
Chair.
good news.
It is good news. I'm sure most, if not all of you, are aware we've got 2 air quality management areas. The first one was created around Muckley Corner, around there. And the second one, which is the subject of this report, was in 2016, and it's on the A38, primarily north of sort of Street Hay. Where the levels have dropped more than 10% below the limit. So both of our air quality management areas are in relation to nitrogen dioxide, which is a specific pollutant put out by car exhaust primarily. Where the levels drop below more than 10% below the limit for a period of 3 years, DEPA require us to revoke the air quality management area. Obviously, this was slightly strange because COVID happened. So the worry was, how much of is it down to COVID and how much is reality? But what we found was there was obviously a massive drop in 2020 when COVID hit, and then it shot back up in 2021, but still nowhere near the limit. And since then, it's sort of faded down a bit. And it's our belief, primarily because, I mean, it's road traffic we're talking about. So it's because people are working from home more, maybe more use of electric vehicles. That's the main cause of it. So we're now in a position, and we've got to hold our hands up and say it's not primarily down to this council's actions. It's down to developments in car technology and COVID, really, people just having a different working lifestyle that's led to the drop. But now that we are now 5 years, it's been below 10% for 5 years now. We're really in a position where we need to revoke it. Having said that, I know people are concerned that what if it's a blip? What if it's the traffic around HS2 that's causing a reduction? We continue to monitor this, and should it go up, then we would declare again, and we would look to see if there's any measures we can take, which are limited, I would admit, on a major trunk road, to try and reduce that again. I don't see that as being likely, if I'm honest. I think this is a here to stay situation, but that is still a possibility. So, we monitor no matter what. It doesn't matter. We have to report yearly to DEFRA, no matter what. It's only where we go above certain limits to then declare an air quality management area and put plan in place, an air quality action plan, to try and reduce those if we can. Obviously, this has dropped below it, and now we're in a position where this can be revoked. And incidentally, Muckley Corner is heading the same way, so we see it as being quite likely next year, which again, takes the HS2 element out of the equation, because HS2 isn't really affecting Muckley Corner, and yet Muckley Corner is showing the same reduction. So I'll probably be here in next year doing the same thing. Well, thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Jayan, you wanted to ask something on this?
I think that's been answered. Thank you. It's been answered.
Yeah, right. David?
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, it's good news, especially as I'm about to drive in that direction. I don't need to hold my breath later this afternoon. You mentioned HS2. I'm unsure where the actual monitoring devices are, but I would think there must be a considerable amount of pollution caused by the HS2 development itself, the large lorries, the generators running, and etc., etc. So are our monitors not picking that up? Okay,
It would be included. Included. The point is, we monitor where people live primarily.
Yeah.
We're not protecting drivers travelling through. We're protecting people living there, or any other receptors, schools, hospitals, that sort of thing. Obviously, not relevant here, but so yeah, it would pick up all of that up.
Well, if that is the case, then it is showing quite a sizable reduction in the traffic pollution.
I mean, and the other thing to remember is, in relation to this air quality management area, the main area is actually north of the sort of lower speed zone. And you could argue people are accelerating, it would make it worse. So it's,
All positive. Thank you.
I've got Russ and then you, Richard.
Yeah, I mean, I absolutely agree. I'm I'm just interested as to what the level of monitoring is. I mean, there are permanent devices, presumably. How many, or how extensive is that?
It's actually a thing called a diffusion tube. So it's a relatively cheap piece of kit that we put up on lamp posts and drain pipes and that sort of thing, near receptors. And essentially every month we change them, and the pollutant is absorbed onto a sort of a grid mesh within it. We send it back to the lab. That then gets as a result, which then is assessed. Where some other councils, where they've got more significant pollution issues than we have, they'll have a permanent monitoring station that's far more accurate than diffusion tubes. And what they do is they co-locate diffusion tubes with that monitoring station, and the idea is then the same lab that we use has had a tube with a monitoring station somewhere, and they can then
calibrate
determine the margin of error, if you like. So they'll then go away and say, okay, this is slightly over reading or under reading, and then essentially we get our results. So every month we change, it's more than 30 tubes across the district, but we target the background areas just to give us an idea of the general background levels, but we target areas of higher pollution.
And revoking this won't mean there's any less monitoring, but presumably you can decide to monitor in different areas.
Yeah, we may thin out the number of tubes on the A38, but we certainly wouldn't remove any. But then what we would look is to target other areas where development's taking place and there may be an increase.
Thank you.
Richard,
What other pollutants are we looking for?
There's a range of pollutants in the air quality strategy, particulates, PM10s, particulates less than 10 microns in size, and then there's PM 2.5, which are more considered more able to get down into the further reaches of your lungs and more dangerous. The difficulty with those, there's no requirement for us to monitor those. And part of the reason for things like especially PM 2.5 is it's quite transboundary. So, you know, we'll get a lot of our PM 2.5 from Birmingham, and part of this. Yes, yeah, in the atmosphere, yeah. And part of this is identifying pollution that then we can take action on, if you like. And you know, it's very difficult to do that. So that is nationally monitored. This is more specific to areas where we can impact on it as well.
anybody else like to speak on it before we look at the recommendation? No? So the recommendation is that the committee recommend to the cabinet member that air quality management area order number 2 be revoked. And you will see that DEFRA has supported that as well. So that is good. And it's good news for our district, of course. The cleaner the air, the better. So can we have agreement then, please, from all of you, if you wish? Yeah, everybody, thank you. Thank you very much. And we now come on to the work programme, and that work programme is for you to make any suggestions that you wish. You will see that there's not really much on it at the moment, but when I spoke to James about it, we obviously keep the what's called the footpaths on the agenda, and there may be other things that you wish to be considered. Jack, were you going to say something?
No, not at all.
So is there anything there on the that you would like to make a suggestion for a work programme? I've no doubt something will crop up between now and the next meeting. It's inevitable. But if there isn't, but you can, of course, contact me or contact James at some stage if you wish. Yes.
Yeah. Could I ask that the inspection and the interventions for private rented tenants is sometime during the year? We've had an increase, I understand, in the staffing that are able to do that. And when there's some effect of that, and obviously the legislation might change over the summer as well, I would be quite keen to have that. But obviously that's going into next year's.
Yeah.
Right, we're well into next year's programme.
Say, Chair, we've had increased staffing approved. Unfortunately, one of our staff retired, and so the other one goes. So yeah, it's like a revolving.
Yeah.
No, it's not really, but we're looking hopefully to be far better staff from around April time. But yeah, I mean, I can certainly provide the statistics.
So you know, but perhaps the early autumn would be appropriate then to
Sort of a state of play for private sector enforcement. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, but that's an important issue. I think that I think all these issues that we get here are important issues for the health and safety of the people within the district and for tourists as well. David.
Not for forthcoming, although probably will crop up again in the future, but I just wondered as it goes back to almost 12 months to the July, one of our earlier meetings, if we could have a very brief update on the efficacy of the PSPO on dog control.
Absolutely. Okay.
Yeah, anybody else? Hugh?
Last night on the housing and homelessness session,
gambling was mentioned as one of the causes of homelessness, or addiction to gambling. If we could have an update on gambling policy sometime next year.
Yeah. We used to talk about gambling an awful lot years ago, but it is important, as we found out last night, that gambling is a source of a great problem to people. So
Because it's been normalised. Yeah.
Yeah. They're easy.
anything else? Nope. Right, so you've got some ideas to take and
That'll work.
talk to James about. Thank you very much. Well, very quick.
Thank you, Chair.
Unlike the last one.
Attendance tonight.
Yeah.
Oh, it's 25 minutes.